The Islamic Republic of Iran is preparing to celebrate its 30th anniversary to mark the People's Revolution, but not everyone wants to party. It appears the Bush administration has been secretly plotting to topple the Iranian government using millions of American taxpayers' dollars. Outgoing US President George W. Bush has sanctioned the funding of an international terrorist group outlawed by his own country to do the dirty work. Under the 1981 Algiers Accord signed between the US and Iran in the aftermath of the US Embassy takeover by Tehran's students, the White House agreed not to interfere in Iran's internal affairs. But that accord has become worthless after it emerged the US has opened an office of Iranian affairs in the State Department, overseen by Elizabeth Cheney, the daughter of Vice President Dick Cheney. The unit has been tasked with drawing up plans to overthrow the Iranian government, using more than $120 million to fund the project. The terrorist group MKO, designated illegal in countries across the world, including the US, are the main beneficiaries in this dirty war. The revelations coincide with an investigation by award-winning US journalist Seymour Hersh, who exposed the US Congress for secretly passing a bill channeling $400 million to fund covert operations in Iran using the Mujahideen al-Khalq organization's terror network. Now there are fears the group could unleash a Mumbai-style terror attack within Iran while reactivating MKO cells across Europe to create new Western targets. Today's agenda asks the question, America, will Obama continue the deadly legacy? My first two guests can give us a chilling insight into the MKO's activities. Arash Sametipour is a former member of the group and now a working member of the Nejat Society. He became disillusioned with the MKO's activities, but not before severely disabling himself in a failed suicide bomb blast. And Machon is no stranger to the shady world of espionage and dirty tricks campaigns, after working for British intelligence for some years. And Hugo Charlton, an international human rights lawyer, will bring a different perspective as someone who has advised the MKO at their civilian headquarters in Paris, France. But I want to start with you first, Arash. Why did you leave the MKO, and just how dangerous is the group?
Well, I'm trying to make it short. The whole group is run as a cult of personality around its leaders, Masoud and Mariam Rajavi. Since it is a cult, when a cult member stays away from the cult, is not in contact anymore, and has a chance to start thinking for himself, he realizes that, you know, the whole thing was a big deceit. That's my case. I understood that.
But when people hear you talk about a cult, they think of these sort of harmless religious groups. How dangerous is the MKO?
It was an armed cult, and it has huge potentials of doing terrorist actions. As in 2003, it ordered its people to set themselves into fire and burn themselves here in London and in Paris and in some other cities. A person who takes the order and throws gas on herself and sets herself into fire is capable of wearing bomb belt, going into the building and exploding herself with the same order.
Because of this brainwashing cult effect.
Exactly.
I have to say I'd be very surprised if the US wasn't trying to fund subversive groups within Iran. Certainly now that overt military action appears to be untenable for the US, they're going to, of course, try to use propaganda and foment dissent within the borders of Iran.
But funding a terrorist organisation, I mean, the MKO is outlawed across the world.
Well, it's becoming de-outlawed in certain countries, and certainly in the EU it will be as well. But, I mean, we've been down this path before. My enemy's enemy is my friend. The US funded the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and look where that got them. So it's a very dangerous game for them to play, and they never seem to learn from their mistakes in doing so.
Well, I see my learned friend on the end there has been making copious notes. You've been fighting to have this group lose its terrorist tag. What's the reality?
Well, we must go through it step by step because there's a number of things. The cult point may be a good one, but the reason I've been involved in particular is because it is not, as far as we know, at the minute engaged in violent terrorist activity. It has been demilitarized. It has not engaged in conventional terrorist activity for many years now. And on that basis, as a human rights lawyer, as someone who is opposed to terrorism legislation, which is being used to oppress all sorts of dissident groups, and this is just another dissident group, that's why I don't like terrorism legislation being used against some people and not others. Why aren't the CIA a terrorist organisation? Why should the PMOI be one? So that's where I come from, and at the minute, as far as I'm aware, they are not engaged in violent terrorist activity, and that's an important point.
Yes, but we've just heard that some of them are turning themselves into human torches in public buildings in 2003.
And my question is, do you think they have lost the potential?
No.
Have they ever officially said that we are not terrorists?
Yes.
Did you see their logo? The gun is still on their logo.
Well, the place is full of guns. I mean, I'm a member of a military unit, and I have guns on my badges with guns.
Well,
that doesn't
back
make...
to my first question, have they ever said that we are not going to commit any terrorist activities?
My understanding at the minute is that they say, yes, we are not going to engage.
So why
we are not engaging terrorist
Why
activity.
don't they announce it officially?
Well, I think, as I understand it, they have said that they are not engaging in, at the minute, in terrorist activities. Now, if you're saying, are they going to refuse ever to do so? No, and I wouldn't ask them to any more than I ask the PKK. I support the PKK when they're on a ceasefire. When the PKK are off a ceasefire, then I don't support them. It's as simple as that. On the one hand, they could continue to subvert Iran, and I'm sure they are doing that every way they can. At the same time, the reason why Europe and America actually put them on the terror proscribed list in the first place was a sort of diplomatic negotiation. It was a diplomatic gesture to Iran.
Let's see what the members of the public think, because we've come to that part in the show where we do ask the public for their view, but where did Amir Tahuri go this time to ask the questions?
I went to Kensington today to find out what people think about governments funding terrorist organisations, and this is what we found. Now, what would you think, for example, if the government is funding terrorist groups?
Oh, I'm sure they are, because governments have an agenda.
If a government is directly funding a terrorist organisation, I would be that would be scandalous.
The problem is always that as soon as there is money involved, somebody must sell the weapons to the terrorists. And of course, these are Western countries who sell weapons.
It kind of comes down to sort of making money and controlling other countries. So it doesn't surprise me whether it's the British government or the American government.
I wouldn't be particularly happy about that if we're paying taxes. I don't think it should be funded towards death and violence.
Well, I'm not sure any government is funding terrorist organizations. I'm not aware about that.
Obviously, certain governments around the world could be seen as supporting terror when in fact what they're seeing is that they're actually trying to bring in a change of either political reform.
I think it's appalling to fund any terrorism whatsoever because, you know, it's unlawful and immoral.
The governments have to strike deals with terrorists, whether we like it or not. It's in many ways a despicable thing.
It wouldn't be a good idea, and I wouldn't be happy with them helping terrorist organizations and funding them.
As you can see, Yvonne, people weren't too happy about their taxes being spent on terror. But a few people weren't too surprised either.